My name is Alexandra. For as long as I can remember, I've heard the same phrases over and over. You're too sensitive. Stop being so dramatic. Don't take everything so personally. My family repeated these words so often they became part of my internal monologue. But the real betrayal wasn't in those dismissive comments, it was in what they did behind closed doors while telling me I was imagining things. I discovered the truth at my cousin's wedding. I wasn't going to attend, but something pulled me there, some naive hope that things might be different this time. I arrived exactly 37 minutes late, not by accident, but by design. I thought if I slipped in after the ceremony, after everyone had a glass or two of champagne, I could blend into the background and avoid the usual scrutiny. I was wrong. The moment I stepped into the reception hall, the upscale venue my parents had refused to consider for my own wedding 3 years earlier because it was unnecessarily extravagant, everything paused. That microsecond of hesitation in conversations, the slight shift in posture, eyes darting toward me and quickly away. People smiled, but their eyes remained cold, calculating. My stepmother Caroline glided over in her designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, arms outstretched in a theatrical display of affection. "Alexandra, darling, we were just talking about you, liar." I allowed her brief hug, a perfunctory embrace that smelled of expensive perfume and insincerity. Across the room, my half-brother Nathan held court with our father and 2 uncles, champagne flute raised slightly in my direction like I was a distant acquaintance he vaguely recognized from work. I scanned the crowd for my sister Elise. She stood near the cake display, laughing with perfect teeth at something my father's business partner said. She looked like she belonged here. I didn't. The reception was immaculate crystal centerpieces, personalized place cards with calligraphy, a string quartet in the corner. My parents had spared no expense for my cousin's special day. For my wedding, they'd sent a check that barely covered the catering deposit with a note that read, "This is all we can contribute. We hope you understand." I made my way to the assigned table, catching fragments of conversations that had nothing to do with Nathan's promotion, my father's golf tournament victory, Elise's gallery opening. Not one person asked about my recent award in architectural design or the magazine feature on my firm. Then came the toast. My father clinked his glass and stood, commanding the room's attention with practiced ease. "Before we celebrate our beautiful couple, I want to take a moment to express my gratitude for this extraordinary family," he began, his voice carrying across the reception hall. "This year has brought us closer than ever. We've supported each other through challenges and celebrated our victories together." My jaw tightened as he continued. "Let's raise a glass to this incredible family, to those who show up, who contribute to our legacy, and yes," his eyes swept across the room but carefully avoided mine, "even to those who might be too sensitive to appreciate what family truly means." The room filled with knowing chuckles. I didn't look up from my plate. I didn't have to. I knew exactly who he meant, and so did everyone else. No one came to my defense. They simply drank and moved on, pretending nothing had happened. Classic Richard Price behavior: throw the punch and immediately change the subject. "And now, to the happy couple. May your marriage be blessed with understanding and patience." I wanted to scream, but instead, I smiled just barely. That familiar hollow feeling expanded in my chest, the one I'd spent years in therapy trying to understand. The one they'd convinced me was just my overactive imagination. During dessert, it got worse. My stepmother was several glasses into the expensive champagne my parents had selected for the occasion. "Alexandra's probably too busy with her little drawings to date much. Isn't that right, sweetie?" she said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Nathan jumped in, smirk already in place, designing empty spaces while living in one. A few polite laughs floated through the air, though I noticed some uncomfortable glances. The room tensed briefly, not enough to change anything, just enough to acknowledge the cruelty before collectively deciding to ignore it. I didn't respond. That's the thing about my family: they don't stab you in the back. They smile and do it to your face. And when you flinch, you're too sensitive. I took a sip of water, my hand steady even if my chest wasn't. Every detail of the venue reminded me of what they denied me while lavishing on others. Nathan's graduation party at the plaza, Elise's destination birthday in Santorini, my cousin's wedding at this exclusive venue. Meanwhile, my accomplishments merited, at best, a text message. At worst, complete silence. I knew better than to speak up. When I did, it always ended the same way. My father's disappointed sigh, Caroline's fake concern, Nathan's smirk, Elise's silence. They had their roles, and I was cast as the difficult one, the outsider, the one who couldn't let things go. But something shifted in me that night. It wasn't rage, it wasn't even sadness, it was clarity, sharp, cold, absolute. I didn't belong here, and maybe that wasn't a tragedy. Maybe that was the freedom I'd been avoiding. So I smiled, lifted my glass not to them but to myself, made a silent promise. Never again. I set my glass down with more grace than I felt. They didn't notice, or maybe they did and chose not to care. Either way, I was done expecting acknowledgement. As the evening progressed, my father once again commanded attention. Glass raised for yet another toast. Family is the foundation of legacy, he proclaimed, and legacies don't build themselves. They require loyalty, commitment, and a unified vision. Caroline nodded approvingly beside him, her hands clasped in rehearsed admiration. We've made significant decisions recently to ensure that everything we've built, everything we value, stays protected. He didn't say my name not once, but I felt the omission like a physical blow. He listed Nathan's expanding real estate portfolio, Elise's thriving gallery, their steadfast dedication to the family name. No mention of the Sustainable Design Award my firm had won. No acknowledgement of the community center I designed pro bono. No recognition that I existed beyond an occasional inconvenience. And those who choose paths that diverge from family values, he added, eyebrows raised slightly, shouldn't expect the family to fund those detours. Nathan smiled, slow and satisfied, like he'd been waiting for this confirmation. Elise studied her dessert plate. No one objected. I wanted someone to say, "That's not fair," but no one did. They were all complicit. Just when I thought I'd reached my humiliation quota for the evening, Caroline stood, wineglass swaying slightly in her manicured hand. "We have a special surprise," she announced, a tribute video celebrating our family's most precious moments. I barely breathed as the lights dimmed and the projector flickered to life. Photos began to appear on screen: my father, in his college rowing team, Caroline pregnant with Elise, Nathan's graduation, family vacations, holiday gatherings. But not one image of me. Not one. Entire years of family history played out as if I had never existed. Then briefly, in a group photo from some forgotten barbecue, there I was half cropped out, unnamed, a decorative afterthought. A child at a nearby table whispered, "Who's that lady?" I felt my chest constrict, my hands curl into fists beneath my napkin. I wasn't forgotten. I was erased. It wasn't just neglect. It was deliberate. A calculated deletion. The lights came back on, and applause filled the room. No one looked at me. They all moved on as if I hadn't just watched myself be systematically removed from my own family narrative. In the bathroom mirror, I saw not sadness, but recognition. They didn't see me because they didn't want to. Because seeing me meant acknowledging everything they'd done, everything they'd taken. This wasn't about being left out of a video or a toast-it, was about being written out of a family story page by page, until I didn't even qualify as a footnote. When I returned to the table, conversations flowed as if nothing had happened. I picked up my fork and stared at the elaborate dessert before me but tasted nothing. While they laughed and praised each other, one thought repeated in my mind. I'm not one of them anymore. Maybe I never was. I excused myself quietly and walked to the coat check. The attendant gave me a sympathetic smile, the most genuine expression I'd received all evening. Outside, the night air felt cleansing against my skin. I stood on the steps, my designer heels, purchased on sale after 3 months of saving, pinching my feet, and remembered another night that felt like this one. 4 years ago, my first major design had been selected for the city's new community arts center. The opening gala coincided with Nathan's birthday dinner. You understand, don't you? My father had said. Family comes first. I attended my gala alone, accepted my award to applause from strangers, and told myself it didn't matter. Later, I discovered they had rescheduled Nathan's dinner. It wasn't actually that night. They simply didn't want to attend my event. I opened my purse and pulled out my phone, scrolling absently through notifications when I saw the email. It had arrived months ago from the family accountant and oversight that was never meant to reach me. The email detailed the family investment fund my grandfather had established for all grandchildren, a fund I'd been told didn't include me because I was just a step-grandchild. The account statements showed otherwise. My name was there, with a balance that would have covered my student loans 3 times over, but every withdrawal had been signed by my father, with allocations to N Price Business Venture and E Price Gallery Startup. When I confronted him, his response was dismissive. Nathan and Elise had viable business plans. Your little architectural dreams weren't exactly investment worthy. You're smart, you'll figure it out. No apology, no remorse. Just the same patronizing tone he used when I was 9 and asked why I couldn't have ballet lessons like Elise. I ended up working 3 jobs through design school, sleeping 4 hours a night, and graduating with debt that would take decades to repay. I kept the email, the statements, the proof, not for revenge, at least not then, but because some part of me needed confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that it had happened. But I let it go. I convinced myself they had made tough decisions for the greater family good. I swallowed the betrayal and buried the rage because that's what I'd been taught to do. Now, standing outside the wedding venue, I saw it clearly. It wasn't one betrayal. It was a pattern. And I had been conditioned to stay silent for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to call something by its true name: abuse. They had stolen from Menet just money, not just recognition, but my place, my voice, my belonging. Yet I had survived without them, built something from nothing, while they pretended I had never tried. Something shifted in me irrevocably. They wanted a version of me that played along, smiled, accepted crumbs, and called it love. But I wasn't that person anymore. Back in my apartment, I opened a password-protected folder I hadn't touched in years and reviewed the document's investment fund statements, withdrawal authorizations with my father's signature, emails about reallocations. I found myself typing a message to my grandmother, the only one who had ever treated me with genuine kindness. "Can we talk tomorrow?" My finger hovered over the send button for a moment before pressing it. The morning light made my small apartment look softer than it really was. I stared at my phone, the silence after my sent message growing heavier by the hour. Then it rang. Elise. I hesitated, then answered. "Hey," she said, her voice artificially casual. "Just checking in. How are you feeling after, the wedding?" I laughed once, flat and hollow. "Is that what we're calling it? A wedding?" A pause. "Look, I know it got weird." "You knew," I said, cutting her off. "Don't pretend you didn't." The silence stretched between us until she sighed. "Yes, I've known for a long time." I closed my eyes. That admission hurt more than I expected. "And you said nothing." What was I supposed to do, Alex? Start a war? It wouldn't have changed anything. I just wanted peace. Peace. That word again? "You didn't want peace," I said quietly. "You wanted comfort. There's a difference." She didn't argue, just whispered, "I'm sorry," as if it would undo years of complicity. I ended the call without another word. I wasn't angry, not really, just done. Done waiting for people to grow spines. 2 hours later, I stood at my grandmother's door. She opened it before I could knock. "You came," she said, no surprise in her voice, just a steady certainty as if she'd been expecting this moment for years. I stepped inside, and her living room felt like a museum of things the rest of the family had tried to forge: old photos, family heirlooms, a framed picture of me at my college graduation. Grandmother didn't waste time. "I kept everything," she said, walking to an antique secretary desk, "because I knew one day you'd come looking for the truth." She handed me a leather portfolio. Inside were investment statements, trust documents, and letters including my grandfather's original will with clear instructions that the grandchildren's funds were to be distributed equally, with no exceptions. "And this?" I asked, holding up a leather-bound journal. "Notes," she said. I started keeping them when I noticed Richard changing details every time he told a story, when he began rewriting history to suit his narrative. You never said anything. You weren't ready, she said, her voice steady. But now, I think you are. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but all I felt was something settling like truth had weight, and it had just landed in my hands. Back home, I laid everything out on my kitchen table, scanned every page, matched signatures, checked dates. There was no more room for doubt. This wasn't neglect. This was deliberate. They hadn't forgotten me. They had removed me undecision. One story, one erasure at a time. I opened my laptop and began building a timeline not out of revenge, but to remember. To put the story back together the way it really happened. They wanted peace. I wanted truth. And for the first time in years, I felt steady. No anxiety, no spiraling, just direction. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing for certain: whatever happened, I would be the one writing it. 3 days later, a courier delivered an envelope to my apartment door. Inside was a letter from my father's attorney, the language polished and professional, like someone trying too hard to sound reasonable while delivering a threat. In the interest of maintaining family harmony, it read, Miss Alexandra Price is invited to formally relinquish any claims to the Price Family Trust and associated assets. Such a gesture would reflect goodwill and understanding of broader family considerations. Goodwill, understanding. They always used soft words to dress up sharp intentions. I read it twice, then again. Then I printed a copy, took out a pen, and signed below the line. I added by hand, I don't want a cent from people who never wanted me. No ceremony, no lawyer, no audience, just truth. I folded it once, slid it into a plain envelope, and left it on my kitchen table while my mind drifted to another kind of letterone that never arrived in time. Last year, when I won the Metropolitan Design Excellence Award, I'd sent invitations to the ceremony to everyone in my family. No one came. No one even replied. I accepted the award alone, in a dress I'd designed and sewn myself because I couldn't afford the kind Caroline would have deemed appropriate. Afterward, I checked my phone backstage, not one message, not one acknowledgement. Later that night, my father texted, Heard about your little award. Hope it was worth missing Elise's gallery opening. There had been no gallery opening, I checked. She'd been on vacation in Bali with her boyfriend. Back in the present, I stood by my window, the signed waiver in hand. The city looked deceptively peaceful: people walking dogs, couples holding hands, life continuing in its ordinary rhythm. I held the document between my fingers, and it didn't feel like surrender, it felt like release. For years, I thought letting go would make me weak, that walking away meant I'd lost. Now I knew better. Staying would have broken me, leaving would save me. I slipped on my coat, walked to the nearest mailbox, and dropped the envelope. No tracking, no return address, just a clean cut. I didn't look back, didn't hesitate. I went home, made tea, sat in silence, and for the first time in years, the silence wasn't hollow, it was mine. 5 days after the wedding, I sat in a glass-walled office with my attorney, a legal pad between us filled with notes I'd been compiling for years without realizing I'd receipts, dates, patterns. She flipped through my grandmother's documents, the trust fund statements, and the withdrawal records that told the complete story. This isn't a fight, she said, tapping a page with her pen. This is a statement. I leaned back. Then let's make it loud. She didn't smile. Neither did I. That afternoon, I drafted one email, just one, but it would land like a bomb. Recipients. Every blood relative still speaking to me. Every in-law who had ever smiled while witnessing my erasure. Every family friend who had chosen comfortable silence over uncomfortable truth. Subject line. I thought you should know. Attached were 4 PDFs. Trust fund statements with highlighted transfers, a scan of my grandfather's original will, screenshots of where my money had actually gone, and a side-by-side comparison of what my siblings received versus what was stolen from me. I didn't add a single sentence of explanation. I hit send and walked away. My phone started buzzing within minutes. Cousins, aunts, even my mother's sister, whom I hadn't heard from in years. Is this real? Why didn't you say something sooner? I always suspected something wasn't right. I ignored them all. My father didn't respond, not a text, not a call, just silence, the same tool he always used when control slipped from his hands. Caroline, predictably, didn't disappoint. Her reply was terse. "This is a family matter. Please retract immediately." No apology, no concern, just demand masked as etiquette. The queen trying to command the room while the walls crumbled. I didn't answer. Nathan vanished completely, no calls, no texts, no passive-aggressive social media posts. Total blackout, which meant he was scared. Good. By nightfall, I turned off my phone and poured a glass of wine. I stood by my window, watching headlights blur across the rain-slicked streets, not because I was worried, but because I knew exactly what was coming next. At my attorney's suggestion, we began preparing a formal complaint, not because I wanted to sue, not because I wanted the money, but because sunlight is the best disinfectant, and this rot had spread far enough. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. And this was only the first step. It started with whispers. A colleague from a rival firm reached out. Tone casual but content, anything but, "Hey Alex, heard you've stirred things up lately. Nathan's been calling around, says you're going through something, says you're making things up." I didn't even blink. He said, "What exactly?" "That you're unstable, carrying family baggage, that this is some kind of breakdown." I laughed, quiet, dry. "He's trying to paint me as emotionally unstable." "Yeah," he said, "he's shopping the narrative hard." I thanked him and hung up. Classic Nathan. If you can't bury the truth, discredit the person who speaks it. He was calling in favors, leveraging connections, spinning lies. What he didn't realize was that I'd walked through fire to get here, and I wasn't stepping back just because he threw smoke. I called my grandmother. She answered on the first ring. "He's trying to smear me," I said. "He's scared. He should be." She paused. "I was hoping you'd call. There's something else." 10 minutes later, she forwarded me files I hadn't seen before, documents she'd kept hidden for years. Among them was a formal ethics complaint from my first job at an architectural firm. I had forgotten about it, or maybe I'd forced myself to forget. Back then, I thought it was coincidence, missing design plans, concepts that mysteriously appeared in a senior partner's portfolio, the timing too perfect to be accidental. But I couldn't prove anything. Until now. My grandmother had saved everything: email headers, metadata showing Nathan had accessed my personal computer during a holiday weekend when he'd helped set up my new laptop. He had stolen my designs and presented them as his own to potential clients, nearly derailing my career before it began. My grandmother's voice cracked slightly. "Your father made me promise not to tell you, said it would only make things worse. I regret listening to him." I thanked her, but I didn't call my attorney this time. I called a journalist, a woman whose career was built on exposing exactly this kind of story. Truth wrapped in betrayal, scandal hiding beneath tailored suits and family crests. She didn't ask for proof. She just said, "Send everything." By morning, the headline was already circulating. "Prominent realtor accused of theft and fraud. Sources allege family cover-up." Within hours, Nathan's firm went into crisis mode. Clients began pulling contracts. His face vanished from the company website. His Instagram went private. My father tried calling twice. I let it ring. Caroline left a voicemail so predictable I almost laughed. "You've humiliated us. I hope you're satisfied. This family supported you, and this is how you repay us." Supported me? They couldn't even remember which degree I'd earned, or what my firm was called. I sat in my office, reading messages from extended family members. One aunt finally admitted, "I always knew something was wrong. I should have said something." Too late. I wasn't angry anymore, just clear. Nathan could spin stories, but this wasn't a courtroom. This was the court of public opinion, and he had just lost his case. That night, I received a message from a former classmate from design school. Quiet, brilliant, overlooked in all the ways I had been once. Her message read, "Thank you. People like you make room for people like me." I didn't smile, not really, but something inside me settled just a little. They thought I'd set fire to the house. I hadn't even raised my voice yet. The next morning, I walked into the county clerk's office with a folder under my arm and history in my hands. The complaint was already prepared, typed, formatted, and reviewed, line by line: misappropriation of trust funds, breach of fiduciary duty, Fraud. 3 names sat at the top: Richard Price, Caroline Price, Nathan Price. Attached was everything they thought I'd never find: bank records, authorization forms with mismatched signatures, and my grandmother's signed affidavit verifying the original terms of my grandfather's will. By noon, the documents were public record. By 4 p.m., they were accessible to anyone with internet access and a reason to look. I gave them the truth. What the world did with it wasn't my concern. By evening, Nathan's firm had issued a vague statement about his temporary leave of absence pending internal review, but I already knew what that meant. My father's name disappeared from his club's board of directors list, with a note quietly added, "Committee reorganization in progress." Caroline canceled her beloved charity auction out of respect for privacy, the statement said. Elise texted me late that night. I didn't know it would go this far. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. You never asked how far it had already gone for me. She didn't write back. My father, though he finally did, the subject line of his email, "You are no longer welcome in this family." There it was, the last brick in the wall they'd spent decades building between us, now handed to me like a souvenir. I opened a new draft, typed, paused, deleted, typed again. Then I didn't send it. Instead, I wrote it out on a notepad and read it to myself. You erased me. Now I'm just finishing the job you started. I closed the notebook and turned off my phone. There was nothing left to say to them: no more defense, no more proof, just distance, the real kind. I sat in my office as the sun dropped behind the city skyline, gold leaking through the blinds. News sites were still spinning articles, reposts, speculation, but inside, everything was still. Not hollow, not numb, just quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after you've told the truth loud enough to be heard and no longer care who believes it. 3 weeks after the wedding, I hosted dinner at my place. Nothing elaborate, just pasta, salad, and wine I didn't choose for the label. My grandmother came early with apple pie and her steady, comforting presence. 2 colleagues from my firm arrived with their partners and nervous laughter, unsure if they were overdressed. A friend from my building brought homemade bread and stories that had nothing to do with lawsuits or betrayal. We sat around my kitchen table, small, scratched, real. No place cards, no veiled insults, no toasts disguised as judgments. We passed food, we talked about books, terrible movies, inside jokes. There was no hierarchy, no power plays, just people, just connection. After dessert, my grandmother helped me rinse dishes. She didn't say much, but she didn't have to. Her eyes were steady, proud. The next morning, I drove alone to a quiet cemetery on the edge of town. I brought no flowers, just a letter. I sat at my mother's grave and read it aloud, even though I wasn't sure I believed in any version of an afterlife. I did it, Mom. I kept my spine. I kept your name clean. I'm not in their shadow anymore. I'm not under their thumb. The wind moved the leaves around my feet. I folded the letter and tucked it beneath a small stone on her grave marker. I didn't cry. I just breathed. And then I left. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. I didn't need to listen. I saw the name before I deleted it. Caroline. I pressed play anyway, just long enough to catch her tone. You got what you wanted. We've lost everything. I hope you're proud. I stopped it, deleted it. That wasn't pride she heard in my silence. It was peace. They thought I wanted to take something from them, but the truth was simpler. I just needed to get myself back. That night, I sat in bed with a cup of tea and a quiet apartment. I looked around at the space I'd built, not perfect, not extravagant, but mine. I thought about everything they had taken and then everything I had reclaimed. Some wounds would never heal clean, that's not how it works, but they didn't have to. I didn't need closure to move forward. I just needed clarity. I wouldn't fill the empty spaces with people who only showed up to take. I chose solitude over illusion, truth over tolerance, peace over pretending. I chose me. They called me too sensitive, but I'm more aware than ever aware that I finally walked away. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. I spent years trying to earn a place at a table that was never built for me, tried to prove my worth to people who had already decided who I was. But here's what I've learned. Peace isn't given. You create it. Family isn't about blood. It's about respect, truth, and safety. And healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means release. If you're carrying weight that doesn't belong to you, let this be your permission to set it down. You're allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to rewrite your own story. And you don't need anyone's approval to begin. So now I'll ask you, have you ever had to walk away from a version of family to find yourself? Do you believe silence keeps peace or just prolongs harm? If this story resonated with you or helped you see something more clearly, leave a comment below. If it didn't connect with you, that's okay to tell me why. I read everything. And if you're still here, still listening, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that speak truth, touch hearts, and remind us we're not alone. Until next time, take care of yourself like someone you love.